Hello everyone, welcome to the first screencast for week 6. This week we're going to be covering two extremely important chapters in our book. The content is pretty weighty this week, but in order for us to even remotely get to where we need to be by the end of the semester, especially after taking last week to do theories, I want us to hit language and nonverbal communication this week. So this week I am going to try to keep my screencasts to a minimum though, because I really want you to dig into these two chapters in our textbook. I believe they are chapter 7 and chapter 8. Don't trust what I'm saying. Look at what I wrote in the announcement for this week, okay, at the top of all of our, at the top of the module, okay? But I believe it's chapter 7 and chapter 8, and if I'm wrong, that's okay. Sometimes they move the chapters around, and I teach out of multiple interpersonal books. So this book, though, this book has such good content on language and nonverbal communication. I want you to really dig into the book this week. So I'm going to try to keep my screencast to a minimum, and I'm going to hit some high points that your book sort of mentions, but doesn't quite. So let's dive into language here. I want to begin with this quotation here, just like with relational dialectics. I started with something from Blaise Pascal. I want to start out with Wittgenstein here. Okay, if you don't know who this is, Wittgenstein is an influential thinker in actually multiple disciplines. For us today, we're going to start with this quotation: "The limits of my language means the limits of my world." And I like this quotation because it highlights the power that language actually has in our understanding of the world. And now we did some of this way back in week 1 where we talked about how we use language to put words to the things of the world, and we use words to make sense of our emotions. And we haven't done emotions yet. I'm doing some things out of order right now. But our emotion is a feeling, but we actually have words to help capture it. And sometimes words do it, and sometimes they're not enough. But the limits of our language means the limits of our world. And so this is the way we can express and understand whatever that is. And so this time we're going to talk about verbal communication. Okay? Now, verbal communication deals with words. Duh. Okay? That sounds silly. But when we get to nonverbal communication, you're going to see why I've made that distinction, because the verbal part is the words we say. The nonverbal part is actually how we say them, and our body and our environment and all that kind of stuff. Okay? So I'm going to just hit a couple of high points here. I want to talk about the impact of language, and your chapter covers a lot of ground. One of the things that I want to clarify and pull out a little more is the notion of power, and I want to talk about powerful and powerless speech. Okay? So what I would like you to do as I'm talking about this is to try to think about your own speech patterns. Think about the ways that you talk, okay? Because speakers whose speech is free from powerless speech mannerisms are rated as more competent, dynamic, and attractive than speakers who sound powerless. This is a fascinating phenomenon. Folks, the way that you talk matters. The way that you sound, the way that you articulate, the way that you project matters. And so this is something that people might not think a whole lot about, but you really do need to think about the type of speech that you have. And now, by the way, powerful speech does not mean that you're overbearing. It doesn't mean that you're yelling. It doesn't mean that you're not letting people speak. What it means is that when you do speak, that you are as free from the powerless speech mannerisms as possible, okay? And your book talks a little bit about this here and there, but it doesn't really pull it out specifically like I want us to talk about it. So let's talk about powerless language. There are different forms that powerless language will take. So, sorry, I'm still getting over my sickness, so I'm still a little, try not to cough here. So you've got hedges. A hedge is where you hedge on actually stating how you feel or how you think about something. So for example, a hedge is, oh, I'm kind of disappointed. Instead of actually saying, I'm disappointed. When the real feeling is you're disappointed, when the real feeling is you're upset, but you verbalize, well, I'm kind of disappointed, or I'm kind of upset. Excuse me. It's early. Sorry. The hedge is you not fully expressing what you're feeling or thinking. You're hedging on it, okay? So a powerful version would just be, I'm disappointed, and you own it, okay? The next piece of power is going to be responsibility. And oftentimes, we don't want to take responsibility for things, and so we use powerless language. Now, sometimes is powerless language a good strategy? Yes, it is actually, because sometimes if you just outright said, I am disappointed in this, it might not be good for the context. You have to have your communication competence at work to know when you need to do that, though. What you don't want to do is hedge all the time. What you don't want to do is default to the powerless language. I'll say that again. What you don't want to do is default to the powerless language. You want to be able to say, I'm disappointed, I'm upset, I am angry, okay? To be able to articulate that clearly. Next is a hesitation. Now, a hesitation is going to sound a lot like a hedge, all right? But what the hesitation does is something like this. Well, we could try this idea instead of actually saying, I have an idea and here it is. You're hesitating to share your idea. You're hesitating to actually say how you feel. So the hedge and the hesitation look a lot alike, okay? But they're slightly different. And what I want you to think about here is, do you see yourself doing any of these when it's not necessary? Do you see yourself hedging? Do you see yourself hesitating when it's not necessary? When you could say, I have an idea and I think we should try it. When, why wouldn't you say that? If the context says something different, does the context need to shift? Do you need to shift? What's the issue here? The polite form. Excuse me, sir. Now, politeness is not bad, okay? But sometimes, if this is your default, where you can't just say, "Hey, I've got something to say here," the polite form can be a form of powerless speech here. The tag question. The tag question is making a statement without making the statement. And it's a weak form of making the statement. So it's about time we got started, isn't it? Instead of saying, "Hey, everybody, let's all quiet down. It's time to begin." Sometimes would this maybe be a good choice? Sure, but if this is your default, ask yourself why. Why can't I just say, "Hey, it's time to start," or "Hey, it's time to leave. Let's go, everybody," instead of saying, "Hey, isn't it about time we got going, everybody?" Why can't you just say, "Hey, it's time to go, we're going to be late," right? What is it? What is the barrier between you just outright stating it and why you're using the powerless version of it, okay? And then the disclaimer. The disclaimer is the I probably shouldn't say this, but I could be wrong, but this probably won't work, but and I can understand how the disclaimer can sometimes look like a hesitation, right? We could try this idea, can also fall in the realm of the disclaimer, but essentially what the disclaimer is going to do is it's going to say, I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to. I'm probably wrong, but what about this? Instead of the hesitation is, well, we could try this idea. The hesitation doesn't have the other piece, okay? The disclaimer says, we probably shouldn't try this, but I'm going to say this. I'm probably wrong, but... And in essence, you're contradicting yourself with a disclaimer, okay? You're saying, I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to. I'm probably wrong, but, you're probably right, right? So the hesitation just says, we could try this idea, and puts it out there, all right? So these are just some of the forms of powerless language. Do you see any of these that you tend to use? And if you do, why? And if you can see yourself using them, attempt to work yourself out of that, okay? So you've got powerful and powerless speech, and now we get to responsibility, the language of responsibility. So the language that we choose to use reflects our willingness to take responsibility for our beliefs, feelings, and actions, okay? This is going to take the form of it, but, or I, you, and we language. And you can see our level, you can see our level of willingness to accept responsibility based on the language that we're using. So, for example, an it statement avoids ownership and avoids taking a position. Now, sometimes this can be good, all right? Sometimes this can be bad, all right? So it replaces the personal pronoun I with the immediate construction it's. So, for example, an it statement is, it's not fair when, well, really what you're saying is I feel like I am being treated unfairly. Did I just say I am being treated unfairly? That's the I version of that. I is going to be better, by the way. Okay. The it statement just says it hurts when, and that's not always bad. Okay. It hurts me when you do this, or it bothers me when this happens. So sometimes it's good. Other times, though, it's much more responsible to say, I feel hurt when you say you're going to do something and you don't do it. I feel bothered when this happens. Make sense? So that's it statements. I language will clearly identify the speaker as the source of the message. I takes responsibility. Okay? So now you've got the but statement. The but statement takes the form of X but Y. And the but cancels out everything that precedes it. Okay? This is another reason why a disclaimer doesn't really take responsibility. A disclaimer will usually be a but statement. Okay? So I probably shouldn't say this, but I might be wrong, but buts are a face-saving strategy, which is a funny phrase, I know. But what the but does is it says, I know you're right, but I'm going to do whatever I want to do anyway. Or I know you're right, but I don't care. Is essentially what you're saying there. The but can be okay sometimes. Sometimes a but statement can be a good way of affirming someone. That's a really good guess, but it's actually this. Sometimes a but statement can be good, okay? There are stronger ways of saying it. You can say, that's a really good guess. I appreciate you doing it. It's wrong, though. Here's the right one, right? And sometimes just having that but taken out of there can make you take more responsibility for what you're doing. What version of the but statement do you see that you use or that the people in your life use to avoid responsibility? Okay, that's the real trick of the but statement. Sometimes we say we use a but statement to affirm someone, but that's not fully the but statement. The but statement is when you are avoiding responsibility. You're saying, well, I see what you mean, but I'm not going to do it. That's not what I want to hear, or whatever. Makes sense? So you've got it statements, but statements, and then you've got I, you, and we language. So I language accepts responsibility for the message. You language expresses judgment. Okay? So I language would be, I feel upset when you are late to pick me up. You language would be, you are always late. Okay? Just to be clear, just because the word you is in a statement does not make it a you statement. And just because the word I is there does not make it an I statement, okay? I language accepts responsibility, you expresses judgment, okay? So just because the I and the you are there or not there does not indicate what type of statement it is. It's all about the responsibility. Is the person owning the responsibility with the language they use, or are they expressing judgment? You can always tell that, okay? I language shows that I take responsibility for it by describing my reaction to your behavior without making judgments about its worth. So it's one thing for me to say, you were late and that hurt me. That's an I statement. You were late and that hurt me. I can say, I am hurt when you were late to pick me up. That's an I statement as well, even though I have the word you in there. Okay? A you statement can also say, can express judgment. I think you're a loser when you're late. That's judgment. Okay? Even though I'm still owning it, I'm judging you. Okay? So if you're going to have a good I statement, it has 3 parts. It doesn't have to be in this order, but it does have these 3 parts. And I'm going to stop. We're almost done with language, and I'll see you in the next screencast.